and in Spanish so that you can come back to it if you need to. It's going to be a lot of really good information. So I'd like to introduce, first and foremost, our presenter for today, Ms. Heather Goodwin. Ms. Goodwin.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cisneros. It's exciting to be back here today and to be sharing with our families our local assessment measures. These are the tests that your student may participate in over the course of the year at any given school within our district.
Beautiful, thank you. And I'd like to give a special welcome and thank you for being here to Ms. Yvonne Orozco Rangel. She is our one of our interpreters for the district. Thank you, Yvonne, for being here. So, we always want to start off with a thank you on behalf of the Board of Education here at Albert Unified School District. Thank you for being here. We have so many good things and we do so much for your students, but we can't do it alone. So we have to rely on this partnership between you and us, between the home and the school, to make sure that the two groups of people that kids spend the most time with, parents in the home, us here at the school, that we work together to make sure that the student is loved on and is cared for. So thank you for being here. I want to remind you that we do have the option of Q&A, the question and answer. So if you have a question throughout the session, please feel free to drop it into the chat or into the Q&A. And then we'll be addressing and answering those questions both as we go. And then we also have a session, a little spot of time at the end of the session to address any lingering questions. If you'd rather not type in the question, but you'd like to actually verbalize the question and speak it, you can raise your hand and then I'll prompt you to unmute your device and then you can ask the question. Again, the session is being live streamed, it's being recorded, and it's going to be made available on youtube.com/Alejandro Cisneros for you to come back to it if you need to. Interpretation is available, tenemos interpretación disponible. En la parte inferior de su pantalla verán un globo que dice Interpretation. Si están en su teléfono, verán esos 3 puntos que dicen More o Más. De ahí pueden cambiar el idioma de inglés a español. Ya está activa la interpretación con Yvonne. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our Director of Assessment and Special Projects and Research and all sorts of other things that Ms. Goodwin does. Ms. Goodwin?
Thank you again, Dr. Cisneros, and thank you for joining us tonight. We're excited to have the opportunity to share this information with you. So tonight is all about talking about our local assessments. If any of you were with us last month, we talked about the summative assessments. Those are the statewide assessments that are administered in the spring each year. Today, we're going to talk about the assessments that we use here in Alvord. And there is a whole range of different kinds of tests or assessments that we consider to be local. Local just means that it's something that we do here in Alvord. The first type of local assessment that we use is called a universal screening measure or a universal screening assessment. And those are administered across the entire district. It's a district decision to implement them. And we implement these measures in several different areas so that we get a comprehensive picture of how our students are doing in English language arts, math, our social emotional learning, physical fitness, and Spanish language arts for those students that are enrolled in our dual language immersion program. Another type of local assessment is the common formative assessment. Now, these are assessments that might be administered across a department or at a specific grade level within a school. And that is selected by the grade or department. So teachers will get together, they will look at their instructional planning and decide that they need to administer a test before or after a unit of instruction occurs at school. This lets them know how students are doing based on the learning that they're providing in the classroom. And again, those are selected and administered at the discretion of teachers and departments. Then there are classroom assessments. So similar to the common formative assessments, a classroom assessment is one that, rather than entire grade or an entire department administering, this might be something that I choose to do within my classroom. And another teacher next to me in the same grade or department might select a different assessment. We also have informal assessments. Those go on all day long. These are informal observations. So I'm sure that you can remember when you were in school and your teacher would walk around the classroom and maybe take a look over your shoulder or ask you a quick question just to see if you understand. That's what we would consider an informal assessment. And then there are also diagnostic assessments. So if a teacher administers any or all of those other type of local assessments, a universal screening measure, a common formative assessment, a classroom assessment, or an informal assessment, and they decide they need some more information about how a student is doing in a particular area, they might select a diagnostic assessment to administer to the student in one or more areas. And the good news is that all students participate in one or more of these types of local assessments throughout the year. We're going to focus most of our time today on universal screening measures. These are the local assessments that we have decided as a district are important for all of our students to participate in so that we can get a strong understanding of how to best support the students in their instructional program and in their learning journey. For English language arts, our students participate in universal screening 3 times a year, in the fall, in the winter, and in the spring. The exception to that are our seniors. Our seniors are not required to participate in the spring of their final year with us. Our TK students, those are our youngest students, they participate in a universal screener called PELI. This assessment is a storybook assessment. So the teacher sits down with a storybook and goes through the story with the student one-on-one, asking them questions. And this helps the teacher understand where the student is in terms of acquiring their concepts of print and basic early literacy skills. Our students in grades K through 5 participate in Acadience reading. Again, this is a universal screening measure that in large part is administered one-on-one for students in K through 5, and it's looking at the early literacy skills that are indicators for teachers of how a student is acquiring their literacy skills. There is a group administered measure for comprehension that begins in grade 3. Students who are enrolled in our dual language immersion program at elementary, grades K through 5, they take a very similar assessment, just in a different platform. So it's just like Acadience reading, but it's called DIBELS 8th. And then our students in secondary, grades 6 through 12, participate in STAR reading. And this is a computer-based test that our students participate in. In math, just like language arts, students participate 3 times a year in grades K through 12. Our TK students don't participate in a math assessment at this time as a universal screener. But beginning in kindergarten, they take something called the Universal Screener for Number Sense. And this is a one-on-one assessment that the teacher does with the student. It looks at their number sense skills. And then beginning in grade 1, our elementary students take an assessment called Reveal. Now, Reveal is the same as the adopted materials for math for elementary students. And that's a course diagnostic, and it's looking at the previous grade level standards to see if a student is ready to engage in first best instruction at their current grade level. And then students in grades 6 through 12 participate in something called MDTP, which is the Mathematics Diagnostic Testing Project. And there's a whole suite of assessments within MDTP that are aligned to the math course that students are enrolled in. So in middle school, for the most part, they'll take the 6th grade test, the 7th grade test, or the 8th grade test. Some students in middle school, if they are in an accelerated math class like IM1, might take the IM1 test. And then once our students get to high school, then they're taking an MDTP test that is aligned directly to the course that they're taking. We also administer a survey to see how our students are in terms of social emotional learning. This one happens twice a year, in the fall and early spring. For our youngest students in grades K2, they participate in a district created measure where they're asked some very simple questions like, how do you like coming to school? And they select an emoji about their response, how they feel. It's either a smiley face, kind of a neutral face emoji, or a sad face emoji. And I think there are 10 questions that each student answers. And then for our students beginning in grade 3 all the way through 12, they take a more formal survey in Panorama. For students in grades 4 and up, they take a physical fitness screening in the fall. And then for our students enrolled in the dual language immersion program, they take a Spanish language arts universal screening assessment, and that is done in conjunction with their English language arts assessment on the same platform. So if they are in elementary school, they take DIBELS 8, which is the ELA component, and they take Lectura, which is the Spanish language arts component. If they are in secondary, which now this year extends to high school and our 9th graders, they take the STAR reading for the ELA component or the English component, and they take the STAR Spanish for the Spanish language arts component.
Ms. Goodwin, I have a question, please. So when our students take all of these assessments, depending on their grades, how do the teachers use that information?
That's a great question.
Thank you.
So our district follows something called a multi-tiered system of supports. That's what guides all of our instruction and protocols for students. It's separated into 3 tiers, and I'm sure that we can follow up with some graphics for you. They're not included in the presentation, but we can go back and add them. Tier 1 instruction is what every student gets every single day. That's what the teacher does in the classroom, and it's for every student in that classroom, and it is based on grade level standards. That's important to know. Tier 1 instruction, all students, and it's based on their current grade level standards. The Tier 2 of our MTSS pyramid are students that may need some additional support in order to be successful in grade level standard work. And then Tier 3, perfect, look at that. Thank you so much. Tier 3 are for those students that may need a significant amount of intervention. And so the reason that we use these universal screeners 3 times a year is to take the temperature, so to speak, of how our students are performing. We like to say that it's like when you go to the doctor. there are some universal measures every time you go to the doctor that they'll do. Like my favorite happens to be standing on a scale. That's one of the universal things that they check every time you go to the doctor, right? Right away, they want to see, well, based on your height, where does your weight fall? Does it suggest that you're healthy or that maybe we need to make some adjustments? Either wouldn't it be wonderful if we needed to add some weight or if we needed to take some weight off? But that's a quick universal measure that doctors or the healthcare system use to say, how are you doing overall? Blood pressure is another one that they typically check. A quick measure to see how are you doing generally speaking. And so our universal screeners act like that for our teachers. It's a quick snapshot of where students are performing and what kind of support they may need instructionally, whether that's tier 1 support, they're right where they need to be. And as long as they're at school on a daily basis, participating in learning, they're likely to be successful. They're off by just a little bit, so we need to make some tiny adjustments for them and give them a little bit of extra support, and we should be able to move them into that tier 1, or they need some significant supports because they might have one or more areas in which they've got gaps.
Got it. Thank you. So if I could just maybe make sure that I'm understanding it correctly and clarify it for our parents and parents, please feel free to chime in and with questions or comments into the chat. So the universal screeners are this first tier. Everybody is assigned, or everybody takes these screening assessments. That's why they're called universal. It's for everybody, so that the teacher is able to really have a clear idea of where the child is performing on either language arts or math or whatever the subject may be. And then based on that, if they're on track, then they continue with the general first best instruction. If that assessment, that screener determines the child might need a little bit of support, a little bit of extra help in order to master the standards, then that's when they go into this tier 2. They get the support from the teacher, and then, or we also have a series of specialists and instructional coaches and TOSAs and all sorts of people throughout the district. Then they take another assessment just to kind of circle back and cycle back and close the loop to make sure that the child has learned the material. If they have, then it's kind of fluid, so they keep coming back to this tier 1 and keep getting the first best instruction. But if the child still doesn't fully master the standard, then they go into this intensive services, and that is really based child by child on what that child may need in order to master the standard. So really the way I understand it is all of the assessments and all of the support that is provided to the students is making sure that they are making progress towards the standards and learning at a high level. And the assessments and all of these tests that, let me go back to this screen. All these common formative assessments, informal assessments, classroom assessments, all of these tests that our students are continuously presenting and showing is just to make sure that they are kind of going. If you picture parents, if you picture like a caravan of cars, you kind of look back like, yep, everybody's with me. Yep, everybody's with me. And if they're not, if somebody's kind of veered off, do they run out of gas and you just kind of give that person the gas, right? Or do they need something completely more intense? And that's up to the teacher to really determine. So these assessments, Ms. Goodwin, I'm really glad that you brought up the multi-tiered system of support. It's a beautiful visual to show how children are supported. So thank you, Ms. Goodwin.
Thank you. And I've added that to the slide deck. So at the very end of this presentation, we're going to ask you to fill out just a quick feedback survey, and you'll have a link to these slides too, in case you ever want to refer back to them. And so that's been added in. One thing I'd like to add, if you could go back just a second to the pyramid, there's one more layer to that, which is if your student is participating in any kind of tier 2 or tier 3 intervention, we add something else in there called progress monitoring. Because if your student is receiving additional support, especially at the tier 3 level, we don't want to wait between like fall and winter or winter and spring to see if the supports that we're providing are effective. So we use progress monitoring to check to make sure that we're filling those gaps every couple of weeks.
Thank you. Let me go back to the presentation. And the intent of this presentation isn't to fully flesh out and discuss the social emotional supports that we have in the district, but I'm curious if you would be able to say more onto these SEL screeners, or maybe I think you have a slide specifically on an SEL screener. Maybe I know we have Panorama, but just what do the teachers or counselors, who gets this information and how do they use it?
So when you look at our universal screening measures as a whole, and I think that this is something that, especially post-pandemic, we have really started to be more mindful of, is looking at the whole student and not just at their academic performance, right? So when we are looking at our universal screening measures, when we are thinking about our multi-tiered system of support, we really want to take into consideration the entire student. What does their attendance look like? What are their grades look like? How do they feel about themselves and about coming to school? Are they physically healthy? That's the physical fitness portion there, right? But really looking at our students more holistically instead of just saying, okay, we're going to look at how they're performing academically. Because if we know that if a student is either unhealthy or struggling social emotionally, that may impact their learning as well. So we want that comprehensive picture. So when we're talking about social emotional learning, we're going to ask our students really some questions about their emotion regulation. That's one area that we're looking at. We're looking at growth mindset. We're looking at self-efficacy. Do they feel like they are empowered in their learning when they come to school? And beyond that as well. Again, that helps us understand how we can best support the student, because if a student feels as though they are not very in control of their learning, that they don't really have a responsibility or a role in their learning, they might be less apt to engage in the classroom or engage in learning that's going on, right? And so we can intervene there. And as Dr. Cisneros pointed out, we've got all kinds of supports that we can put in place to help students if we see that there is a need in terms of social emotional learning. Our counselors, both at elementary and at secondary, and our classroom teachers have lessons about character development that they provide all students now. And that is part of that tier 1 instruction, because it's not just about academic standards, it's also about social emotional learning and well-being as well.
Beautiful. Thank you, Ms. Goodwin. And we received a question in the chat that said, so it's a notice of thank you for this discussion to see how students are evaluated. But the comment is, I would like to request that teachers communicate with us on how our students are doing, what's missing, how can we help them at home. And I know that that's part of the conversation you'll be having. So Mr. Gutierrez, if you will give us a few minutes, Ms. Goodwin's going to get to it. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yes, oftentimes that happens, you know, when there are opportunities for parent-teacher conferences, things like that. But we know that doesn't occur frequently, right? You're not going to attend a parent-teacher conference every month or even 3 times during the school year. And if you're not able to attend the parent-teacher conference, what are the options there? So not all of the universal screeners that I mentioned, but many of the universal screeners actually have either a student report or a parent report that the teacher can provide you with. Some of them even are available in multiple languages. If for some reason you get a parent report and it's not in a language that is your preferred, you can always reach out to us and we can make sure we get that information translated for you. So don't ever feel like that's a barrier. If it only comes home in English and there's no other options and you need that document translated, you can always reach out to us and we can support with that. And I'm sure Dr. Cisneros can drop that in the chat, the contact information or who to reach out to if that's the case as well.
Absolutely.
So what you, oops, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, yes, I'll drop that into the chat. Absolutely.
Thank you. So what's on your screen right now is a sample of the Acadience Reading Parent Report. So every time that your student participates in the benchmark assessment, which again is 3 times a year, beginning of the year, middle of the year, end of the year, and our beginning of the year has already occurred for this year, there's a parent report that's available. So the sample on the screen right now is from a beginning of the year report. Acadience has something called a composite score. So you'll see that is in the center of the screen, and it's darker. So it'll say beginning of the year, and then just above that scale score of 61 and the color of blue, you'll see RCS, which is Reading Composite Score. The composite score is how they did overall on all of the measures within that test. And depending on the grade level, there may be one or more subscores. So to the right of that, you see that this particular student participated in a first sound fluency test. That's what FSF stands for. And it also gives you both the score and the performance level. So at the very bottom of the letter, there is a key. And that key describes what each of the colors represents. So if you see red, that means that your student was performing well below benchmark. And if you think back to that tier system that Dr. Cisneros shared with us, there is some correspondence with the colors there, right? Well below benchmark would suggest that your student may need some more intensive support in the area of early literacy skill development. Yellow would be below benchmark, green would be at benchmark, and blue would be above benchmark. So ideally, we would want students to perform at that green or at that blue level, and that would be indicative of a student who, as long as they come to school and participate in that tier 1 instruction, they should continue to be successful. Below benchmark, they might need a little bit of additional assistance before the next assessment occurs. And teachers have a whole suite of resources. So when, for example, they have administered the beginning of the year assessment, they get a list of all of the students in their class and how they performed overall and in the sub-tests. And they also receive reports on suggested groupings. So here's a group of students, for example, that need additional support with first sound fluency. And there's corresponding resources for them to use when they are supporting the students in that. The next report sample that we see is for secondary. This is still English language arts, but this is for grades 6 through 12. This is the computer-based assessment that our students participate in. And you'll see that similarly, you see a percentile rank. That's what the PR stands for in that number along the number line in the center of the screen. And also what category that score falls under. So is it below average? Is it average? Is it above average? And then it goes on to give you some additional information. So what is their scale score? What is their percentile rank? What is their grade equivalent? And what does that mean? It is based on national norms. What is their instructional reading level? And what is the zone of proximal development? So the zone of proximal development is something that the teacher can use when they are planning instruction for the student. That instructional reading level also gives them information about reading passages that they may want to select and provide the student with. In addition, for both Acadience and for STAR, students receive a Lexile level. And if you think back to when we were looking at our CASP student score reports, that also provides a Lexile level. That Lexile level helps students know if they're checking out a book, if they're looking at an ebook, what their range is when they're selecting a book to read.
Ms. Goodwin, we received a question in the chat that I'd like to highlight. Somebody asked, when do we get these reports? So that time it was when the Acadience Reading Parent Report was shown. When did these reports come out?
So the reports are available as soon as the window closes for students. Now, they are not automatically generated or automatically sent home. So this is something you want to follow up with your teachers about, with your student and with your teachers regarding. Oftentimes, at least in the fall, teachers will bring these to those parent-teacher conferences as something to go over with you. And then you can always request them after the other administrations in the winter and the spring as well.
Beautiful. So this is something that they can request from their teacher?
Yep.
Okay. Is this similar to the SBAC and the CAS and all of the statewide assessments that we talked about last month, where they can pull the report on ARIES, or is this a separate system?
This is separate. It's unique to the platform that the specific assessment is administered in for the most part, which is why I said some of the platforms offer a parent letter, some don't offer a parent letter at all, but we can always provide the information even if there isn't a formal letter that is available within the assessment platform.
Got it. Thank you. So parents, and to that participant who asked the question, reach out to your child's school, child's teacher, counselor, principal. I think that the most direct person who can provide this information to you is your child's teacher.
This is a sample of what a secondary math student report would look like. So after a student participates in their MDTP assessment, they have the possibility of receiving a letter that looks like this. Our MDTP reports are broken down by topic. So you'll see in the center of that screen there, it lists, I believe, 7 different topics that are addressed on this particular assessment. And then it talks about the student score, the critical level, and the total possible. And so really what you're looking at there is to compare the student score or your score with the critical level. The critical level is the one that they've identified as being kind of that benchmark, that baseline for, is the student ready for First Best instruction, that tier 1 instruction. Okay. At the very bottom, it also gives a total score and a % correct as well. This is a sample of our social emotional learning report for students in grades 3 through 12. At the very top right, you see overall how the student performed on the fall SEL screener. It is color coded by level, just like we saw with Acadience, and it corresponds to the colors of the MTSS pyramid as well. So in this example, the 3, which is green, would indicate that the student is doing well or where we would hope to see them. Then you can also see, based on the topics that were included in this student survey, how they performed. So overall in the top, and then by each of the areas down below. So what are some of the resources? First and foremost, talking with your student, asking them what kind of assessments they're participating in. At the very beginning of our time together today, we went through many different types of local assessments, even those informal ones that just include teacher observation and sometimes those questions that they ask your student. Having those conversations with your student, asking them about how they're doing and how they think they're doing in relation to the learning objectives at school is the best place to start. It's the metacognition of their learning. It's giving them an opportunity to reflect on what they've learned that day and make connections. Sometimes those connections can be reinforced just through that conversation process. Always, always a great idea to read with your student. When they're young, that could be you reading to them, and it doesn't matter what language it's in. So if your primary language at home is something other than English, it's okay to read to them in that primary language, because those skills transfer, and that builds literacy regardless of the language that they're being read to in. So that's a great tool to use as well. As they get older and they start developing the ability to read and read proficiently, have them read to you. You have an opportunity when they read to you to ask those thoughtful questions. Those thoughtful questions, when they read to you, help them build comprehension. I know I have listened to many of our kids read, and they will, when they start to read, they get so excited that they can read. They read so quickly. And then if you ask them a question about what they read, they have no idea, because it was all about how fast could they read. So encouraging them to read to you and asking them thoughtful questions about what they read is another great opportunity. Partnering with your child's teacher or school. If you have any questions or concerns, just want to know what your student is learning, become a partner in that work. There are all different kinds of ways that you can do that. You can volunteer on the school campus. You may or may not be volunteering in your student's classroom, but building that connection with the school lets your student know that learning is a priority.
And if I may just put in a quick plug now for school site councils and ELAC.
Perfect.
We are currently in most of our schools, we're still going through the school site council nomination, election, ballot process. So the school site council is the committee that's made up of school personnel, including the principal, teachers, non-teaching staff, but then also community members, including parents. And the school site council is the governing body of the school that develops the school plan for student achievement, that directs and approves different funds and programmatics. So if you have that opportunity, nominate yourself, participate in that voting, and the school site council is a fantastic opportunity for you to really get down deep into the inner workings of a school. If your child is bilingual, there's ELAC, that's the English Learner Advisory Committee. The ELAC is another committee that gives advice to the principal and the school English language facilitator on how to best serve the needs of our bilingual students, our emerging bilingual students, who are still working on mastering their English language mastery or development. So there are ways for you to not only it is partnering with your school, but partnering in a more formalized, mechanistic, systematic way, so you can have real input into the direction of the school. So keep that in mind. We're looking for nominations now. And then there's also the PTO, the PTA. Some schools have ATPs. There's 6 of our schools are community schools. So they'll be looking for community schools state steering committee representatives. So there's ample opportunities for you to do what Ms. Goodwin is asking you to do, is take up the call and partner with your school. Sorry about that, Ms. Goodwin. I just couldn't resist.
No, and I was going there too, because in both of those instances, both School Site Council and ELAC, they look at this data, because this data helps drive the decisions that the school is making towards those programs, and how dollars are being spent and what their goals are moving forward. So I think it was a perfect segue there, and absolutely another way that you can partner with your child's school and engage and learn more just about how the data is being used and how you can support. Some other individual resources, tutor.com. Our students have access to that directly through ClassLink when they log in. There's also Khan Academy. Some of our students, especially secondary students, have accounts already created as they are going through with College Board and maybe PSAT or AP exams. They might have some access to Khan Academy. There's also Homework Hotline. Homework Hotline is not affiliated necessarily with Alvord, but it is another resource. And these are just a sample of a few that are out there. So your individual school may have additional resources beyond this. Many of our students also participate in our expanded learning program, and there are excellent opportunities for both tutoring and enrichment there as well.
So we did get a couple of questions that I'd like to bring up to you. Are the results, this is Angela's asking, are the results ever made available in Aries? And so I can maybe speak, Ms. Goodwin, from the teacher perspective. When I was a teacher in the classroom, I would do informal or formative assessments, just kind of doing those quick check-ins, like a weekly quiz or a unit test. And as a teacher, I would always log that into Aries gradebook. So if your child it's generally for middle and high school, it's more widely used, check their Aries gradebook to see how they're doing. And you can not only see the results of individual assignments, but you can see if your child has any missing assignments, how many missing assignments that they have, because a lot of the times, and myself included as a father, I send my daughter off to school and I trust that she's doing well. And unless something comes to my attention, I don't know otherwise. And so I just think, yeah, she's doing fine. No news is good news. But unless we're actually checking up on our kids are, I have a teenager, she's going to get away with what she can get away with, right? And so it's up to us as parents to really give that freedom for them to explore and grow and learn, but also those guardrails. So I would say that yes, some of the results, depending on the assessment, are made available in Aries. But then to Ms. Goodwin's point, some of them are not, like these reports from Acadians and Panorama. So I would say, as she mentioned, reach out to your child's school. Another question came up. I'm sorry, Ms. Goodwin, did you want to add something?
I would like to add to that, because yes, it's possible, depending on the teacher, that they may be adding some of this information in Aries. I will also share that we have a local assessment platform. It's called VAST. And we are working to get all of both the state and local assessment data in that platform. And we are developing a student profile, which will be accessible to students and parents. So that's coming soon. And in that platform, you will be able to see, again, how your student is performing on summative measures like CASP that we talked about the last time when we met, our local assessments that we talked about today. You'll also be able to see things like their grades and their attendance all in one place. So coming soon, so that, again, we want to support what we call data transparency. This data belongs to our students. And so we want everybody to really have access to that and to understand where they are, for students to understand where they are in their learning journey with us and take that ownership and control as well. So coming soon, you should see that, and your students should see that as well.
I can't wait. That sounds like a really easy platform to use. Thank you. Another question came up, says, how can I know if my son is getting all credits to graduate? Please let me know. Thank you. Thank you to Ms. Viveros, who answered the question with a really good answer. Talk to your child's counselor. If your child is in high school and you're concerned that they may not be on track to graduate, the best person to reach out to is the child's counselor. You can also go into the Aries Parent Portal, and through the Aries Parent Portal, you can download the child's transcript. And on the transcript, it tells you how many units they have and how many units they still need to graduate. So that's all available in Aries. I've dropped into the chat a link to a video that I created that shows you how to walk through and navigate all of the options in Aries Parent Portal, including attendance and grades and gradebook and transcripts and the big state test reports. That's all in there. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to your child's counselor. Thank you, Ms. Viveros, for that answer. Another question that came up, does the after-school program help students with homework and if they are struggling with math? Ms. Goodwin?
I can't speak definitively to the programs, just my experience with the program. When I was still at the site as a site principal, and they absolutely did have time to assist students with homework and to provide tutoring as well.
Yeah, I know that the programs do offer like a homework help or homework time so that students are able to help each other out through their assignments. And then also the facilitator in the room with the adults in the room with the kids are able to provide that extra support. Thank you for that very good question. Mr. Lemos has another question. Will VAST have the past testing performance from kindergarten to graduation? What a good question.
It is a good question. It may not have all the way to kindergarten, but it will have several years of data in there.
And for Mr. Lemos, if you are looking at, for example, the end of the year testing like the CASP or the SBAC or the CAST, that does go into your Aries Parent Portal, and you can see a couple of years worth, all of the time of the assessment reports that your child has had with Alvord. That's through the Aries Parent Portal. So again, in that link that I dropped into the chat, there is a section in there specifically on how to access the state tests. Rosalba says, can we have the information for tutoring? I believe Rosalba is referring to tutor.com. Ms. Goodwin, would you be able to remind our families on how to access tutor.com?
Sure, students can access tutor.com directly through ClassLink. So that's an application that is on their Chromebook, and they are familiar with. It's their single sign-on platform that they use to access all of their learning.
Beautiful, thank you. I think that's also just such an important aspect, something you just touched on. It's a single sign-on. Children just need to have one username and one password to get onto. It's called ClassLink. And on there, there's all these tiles and options for applications where they can access all of the learning platforms that we have purchased licenses for your children, including tutor.com. Some schools use, for example, MobiMax, Google Classroom. All of that is in one place. And we've also made it very simple for our younger learners. They have QR codes because it's hard to type in a username and password for any of us. I always make typos with my passwords, but for little ones who are just learning their letters and their phonemic awareness, it's really useful to put a QR code and gets them in. Let's see here. We have another question about the bilingual program. My child is in 4th grade and his native language, his home language is Spanish. Are there classes, specialized classes so that he learns English? I don't know what specifically is meant by specialized classes, but Ms. Goodwin, would you be able to speak briefly about English language development in all of our classrooms?
What grade was the student?
4th grade.
Okay, so that would be English language mainstream program, most likely at the elementary school. And so students whose primary language is other than English, they participate in English language mainstream for the most part, but they also have 30 minutes a day of dedicated English language development, as well as what we would call integrated English language development that are strategies and resources provided throughout the day so that students who may speak a language other than English can still access the learning. In addition, there are other resources available both on campus and through our district office for any students that are new to the country and new to learning English. We have bilingual instructional assistants on most of our school campuses, and they can also support students who may be new to the language. And we have resources through our English Learner Department for families as well. So if your student happens to be new to the country or new to learning English, there are resources that are available there too. It might be a device so that they can access translation applications to be used at school or at home, or applications specifically to help them learn English as well.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. As Ms. Goodwin says, we have an entire department here in our district office wholly dedicated to making sure that our students who are emerging bilinguals, whose parents mark that their home language is not English, develop English language mastery, of which, as I mentioned earlier, Ms. Yvonne Orozco, she is in that department as an interpreter to make sure that our families have access to be able to have communication with their schools and their teachers. But through that, we have bilingual instructional assistants, we have designated and integrated English language development. I'd like to maybe just do a quick share of our semester virtual workshop schedule. 2 weeks ago, we had a presentation, and that is on our YouTube page as well, on English Learner Support Services. So we talked about something called the English Learner Roadmap and how we support our students through that English Learner Roadmap in all of our schools. And then the next time we'll be talking specifically about this question. Thank you, Mr. Gutierrez, for bringing this topic up. We'll be here on the 6th of November. We'll be talking specifically about designated and integrated English language development. But that is, about a month and a half away. If you have a specific question for your specific child, please feel free to reach out to your child's school, principal, teacher, me. We can direct you in the right place. Do we have any additional questions? We are almost out of time, but this has been a very healthy dialogue. Thank you, Ms. Goodwin, and thank you to all of our participants and all of our parents here for spending an hour with us to learn to support your children. Oh my gosh, Ms. Rich Creek is here. Miss Ingrid Rich Creek, she is one of our community workers here for the district, and she has just typed into the chat the phone number for the English Learner Support Services Department. So Mr. Gutierrez, if you would like to follow up specifically on what supports your child is receiving to master the English language, reach out to that number in addition to just reaching out to your child's school. Great. Do we have any additional questions? All right. Hearing none, I would like to thank Ms. Goodwin. If we can all give her a virtual round of applause for this fantastic bit of information. Thank you for sharing a couple of weeks ago on the statewide assessments, but now you've brought it down home into what's happening in the classroom on a regular basis. Thank you to all of our parents for being here. Again, we always encourage that if you have lingering questions for this, for your particular child, just reach out to your school, to our district office. It is our job to support your child. But if you have additional questions, let us know. And again, we can't do this work without, let me actually put a spotlight on her. We can't do this work without Yvonne. Thank you, Yvonne, for helping us out and making sure that our Spanish-speaking families have access to the information. All right, everybody have a good night. Thank you, Ms. Goodwin.